We're going to look at American history, the early part of American history, the stuff that should have been covered in elementary school, but you might not have had it. You might not remember it even if you did. So, in order to understand how we get into the Civil War and immigration and that, we really need to know how our country began. And so that's what this set of notes is meant to do. We'll probably not get through it all today. We'll finish it up tomorrow. So, American history, a review. We're going to start with a time period called the colonial period. And the colonial period is the 1600s and 1700s in this country, or in this region, because we weren't a country yet. Colonial, it means we were a bunch of colonies. A colony is a land separate from a country that is owned by another country. It's sort of formed by and settled by another country. How many original colonies were there that eventually became the United States? How many original colonies? Yes. 13 original colonies. And who owned those 13 original colonies? Who started those 13 original colonies? They gave us our government system. They gave us our language. What country owned the original 13 colonies? Great Britain or England? Yes. 13 original colonies owned by Great Britain. The first question from the assignment, meant to be really easy. You guys all should have known that before even stepping in this classroom. Now, where were the 13 original colonies geographically? Were they in the north? Were they in the south? Were they on the west coast? Were they on the east coast? Where were the 13 original colonies? Yes. Yes, they're the east coast of the modern United States. They made up the east coast of what we look at as the United States. And they were created for a variety of reasons. And for your assignment today, you looked at the chart and you were asked to look at those reasons for creating the colonies. What was one of the reasons, one of the things people were trying to do when they set up those colonies? What was the purpose? What was one of the purposes of setting up those colonies? Why get land away from your country and why send people there? Maybe for religious freedom. No maybe about it. Religious freedom is certainly one of them. A place to practice your own religion without being persecuted. That's one of them. What is another one? There were two biggies on your assignment. And when you looked at the charts of those colonies, another one would be, okay, making money, trade and profit. One reason why the settlements or the colonies were created was to make money. Get the land, sell the land, make money. Get the land to raise crops, to trade, tobacco, things like that, make money. Making money was one, and for religious freedom. I don't want to be told how to worship God. I don't want to be told which religion I have to be. Maryland was created for Catholics. Massachusetts was started by both Puritans and Pilgrims. And no, Pilgrims did not wear those big hats with the buckles, and Pilgrims actually wore colorful clothing. It wasn't only black and white. So, colonies were created to make money and to offer religious freedom. two things today that our government values. Okay, one thing that they made in the United States, or in the British colonies, what was it? Three-letter word, starts with an R, stuff that you can't drink yet. Victor. They made rum. They sold rum. What they would do is they would sell rum to Africa. What did they get from Africa in return? We made rum. We sold it to Africa, and in return, we got slaves. Now, we sold rum to Africa. Africans didn't have rum before. You get people drunk enough, you get them to become alcoholics, and they will do anything to keep getting that rum. Most of the slaves that ended up coming to the Americas were people sold by Africans. When African tribes would fight each other, they would capture their enemies. Those enemies were then sold as slaves. It wasn't a bunch of white people going into the jungles of Africa and capturing slaves to bring to the Americas. Africans sold Africans to white people, who then shipped them to the Americas. That's how we begin to get slavery in this part of the world. Most of the slaves went eventually to the southern colonies. Maryland, Virginia, the Carolinas, Georgia. Most of them ended up going to the southern colonies. Now, if I bring up a map, boom, there are the 13 original colonies. The green areas are where it was settled by England early on, right next to the coast, and eventually it grew out, and then by 1760, by the time about 15 years before the Revolutionary War, you get the pink. That's where people were settling. So the original colonists, 13 colonies owned by Great Britain on the East Coast. Anybody have any questions about this? Nope? Good. Moving on. 1754 to 1763. 1754 to 1763. Let's see how many of you remember a question from your assignment. Most of what we consider today the United States used to be owned by what country? What country used to own what is most of the United States? What country used to own Century Junior High's land? From 1754 to 1763. Who owned Forest Lake? You looked at a map in your book. There was red, green, and yellow. If I remember the colors right. And most of what the United States is today was green. What country, according to the legend on that map, was green? France. Yes, most of the United States, modern U.S., the lower 48 states, was French. Around Minnesota, you can even find that out. Some of the names that we have here are French. Hennepin, Duluth, Marquette. There's even a town out in western Minnesota, Lac Qui Parle. Anybody ever hear of Lac Qui Parle? No? Lac qui parle literally means lake that speaks. It's a French name. Lots of names. How many people have ever heard of Duluth? Hennepin, Lafayette? Lots of French influence here in Minnesota because this was French territory. It was part of New France. Here's that map that you looked at in your book. New France, Louisiana. The heart of the United States was owned by France until something happens. France and Great Britain go to war. War. What lots of you want to hear about in history. There's a war. France and Britain go to war. What is the name of that war? France versus Great Britain going to war. What was it called? The French and Indian War. The French and Indian War. Well, that makes it sound like the French were fighting the Indians, but that's not true. The French and Indian War had Great Britain battling who? The French and Indian War had Great Britain battling whom? Okay, had them battling the French and the Native Americans, yeah. At the time, they were called Indians. France and the Native Americans were on one side, battling the British on the other. It's actually a war started by a guy you guys all know. It's a war started by a guy who had false teeth. Guy who had false teeth. So it was started by a guy who has his face on our money. Started by a guy who was not a very good general. Started by a guy that has a myth about him and a cherry tree. George Washington. There's a bit of land that France claimed. They had a fort in this territory, and George Washington was sent out to tell the French, oh, you guys need to leave now. This is our land now. George Washington goes to this area and tries to kick the French out just by saying, okay, this is our land, leave. Do you think the French left? No. They sort of laughed at him. So he attacked, starts the war. Great Britain wins the war and gets all the land east of the Mississippi River. Great Britain wins. Mainly because France doesn't have that many people in the Americas. They had a lot of land, but not a lot of people. So Britain wins. And Britain gets all the land east of the Mississippi River. What does that include? Think about it. What does that include? Parts of Minnesota, yeah. Can you be even more specific? What does that include? Think about it. East of the Mississippi River. Yes. Right here, right where you are standing. Became part of Great Britain as a result of the French and Indian War, because we are east of the Mississippi River. Forest Lake, even though the city was not around at the time, became British, even though it used to be French. Spain, because it helped Great Britain, got all the land west of the Mississippi River. All of France's land in North America, basically gone, with the exception of some islands. Here is where Great Britain takes over that French-speaking province that is now part of Canada. This is where Great Britain gets Quebec as a result of this war. However, do you normally make money in war? No. Think about it. Great Britain had to get weapons and soldiers and ships and ship them across the Atlantic Ocean to fight here. What happens to Great Britain's economy? What does Great Britain go into as a result of this war? What the United States is going into as a result of the wars in the Middle East. We are going into debt. Yes, Britain goes into debt in an attempt to pay for this war. War costs money. You have to pay the soldiers. You have to make the weapons. So Britain goes into debt over this war. Eventually, what do you have to do if you're in debt? What do you have to do if you're in debt? Remember, debt means you spend more money than you have. What do you have to do eventually if you're in debt? What? Okay, you might have to take a loan out. Eventually, you have to maybe sell something to get the money. Why do you need to get the money? What's the point of getting the money? By either a loan or selling something? To pay everyone back. You have to pay off your debts. That's going to come back and bite Great Britain in the butt. Not literally. No, there's not this giant Great Britain person there and somebody coming in biting. No. I know. You know what I mean. It's going to come back to haunt them. One thing that happens as a result of 1763 is the proclamation of 1763. 1763, Great Britain gets all of that land east of the Mississippi River. But it doesn't want any more problems with the Native Americans. Remember, the Native Americans were fighting against them. It doesn't want to lose control of those colonists. So the king says there will be no settlement west of the Appalachian Mountains. All British citizens have to stay between the Appalachian Mountains and the Atlantic Ocean, the Atlantic coast. No settlement west of the Appalachians. That land belongs to Great Britain, yes. But the British in the colonies are not allowed to settle there. The purpose? I'll show you here on a map. 13 original colonies, the Appalachian Mountains. All this yellow area is British land. However, nobody from the green area is allowed to move there, even though that is also British land. Great Britain wanted to make sure that it kept peace with the Native Americans. The French and the Native Americans got along very well. And so when Great Britain went to war with France, the Native Americans helped out the French. Now, the British don't want any more fighting with the Native Americans. They figure if they keep the colonists out of the Native American land, which is now technically owned by Great Britain, Native Americans will be happy. Nobody will become stealing their land. Nobody will come trespassing. And to be honest, do you, let me put it to you like this. The second purpose. Right now, looking at you like this, can I pretty much control what happens in this classroom? Can I see what's going on easily with you all here in this classroom? Okay. What happens if I take you and put you all in the gym? Why is it cool, Victor? You have fun time. Well, no, we're still going to have class. But you are noticing something. If I take this class and put it into the gymnasium, the entire gym, do I have more control or less control over you? Less. You have more space to roam. Victor's like, cool. I can sort of get away and maybe get out of Mr. Rigwald's sight. I can be goofing around and he won't notice. Same idea with the colonists. The King of England said, keep them close to the coastline, because if I let them go in the big area on the other side of the mountains, I'm going to lose control of them. Keep them close. Keep them in a smaller area, just like keeping you in a smaller area here in this classroom. I have a better sense of what you're doing and a better control over you than if I put you in the gym. Those are the main ideas behind the Proclamation of 1763. Control you, colonists, and try to keep peace with the Native Americans. Because if you encroach, if you go in, and this was the pattern, white people come, oh, hey, this is our land. Start building a house, building a farm. Native Americans come around, this is my land. You don't have title to it. You don't have paperwork saying that it's your land. It's our land. See? We went to the courthouse. Here's our piece of paper that says it. Did Native Americans have deeds, land deeds, and paperwork to say that's their land? No. Native Americans didn't even believe in owning land. They thought the land belonged to nature, Mother Earth, and that they were allowed to use it. But they never owned it. So, Proclamation 1763. Western border of the colonies set at the Appalachians. Prevent conflict with the Native Americans. Control the colonists. So far, so good. Pretty straightforward. Keep in mind, I am dumbing this down quite a bit. Okay. The debt. And yes, it is debt. It is not debt. I have heard people say, oh, the depth. The B is silent. English doesn't make a lot of sense when it comes to pronunciation. For example, what am I holding up right now? It's a thumb. It's not a thumb. It's not a thumb. Just like if your pipes are clogged or the pipes, your water service in your house is broken, who do you call? The plumber, not the plumber. The plumber? No. Even though if you go to sleep and you fall into a deep slumber, there you see it, there you hear it. But thumb, plum, debt, silent B. Why? Don't ask me, I don't know. English is strange. We already talked about the debt. What caused the debt for Great Britain? Raise your hand if you can tell me. What caused the debt for Great Britain? Yes. The war. Which war? Which war? We need to keep the war straight here. Yes. The French and Indian War. Well, as somebody said earlier, when you're in debt, you eventually have to pay it off. Britain needs to get out of debt, needs to pay off its bills, needs to cancel that debt. How do you get money to pay off a debt? How do you get money to pay off a debt? Any ideas? How do you get money to pay off a debt? Yes. Okay, maybe you sell something. Other ideas? How else do you pay off a debt? Okay, a government can raise taxes to get more money in. Okay? Anything else? Any other way to pay off a debt? What? Okay, work for money. Any others? If you take out a loan, are you still in debt? Yep, so that doesn't work. So we can either work, sell something, or as a government, you can raise taxes. Which one for a government in this situation for Britain, which one's going to be the easiest solution, or the solution that works the best? Raising taxes. And that's exactly what happens. Parliament. And remember, we talked about Parliament. It's like Congress. It's where the representatives are. Parliament in Great Britain creates taxes to raise money. Okay. Taxes. Benjamin Franklin, one of our one of our founding fathers, says there's nothing certain in life except for death and taxes. Taxes are a necessity for government to work. So Parliament creates taxes to raise money. And some of these taxes, they're actually taxing the colonists. Because in Great Britain they said, you know what? Who benefited the most from this war? Who now is more secure as a result of the French and Indian War? Who doesn't have to worry anymore about somebody directly invading them from the other side of the mountain? The colonists. The colonists are more secure, so the colonists should help pay for the war that they benefited from. The colonists, however, say, wait a minute. We don't have any representatives in Parliament. We don't have any elections that sends people over to Great Britain to sit in Parliament and speak on their behalf. The colonists, who also have to pay these taxes, people in Great Britain have to pay the taxes too, but the colonists have to pay the taxes too. People in Great Britain have representatives in Parliament, but the colonists don't. The colonists start shouting and chanting. Anybody know? Bum 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 bum. Bum 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 bum. Any ideas? Serious response, Victor? Nope, not give me liberty or give me death yet. Nope. Is that a hand up? Ah, Doug. Missing one word. No taxation without representation. Don't tax us unless you allow our representatives to have a voice in Parliament. No taxation without representation. Taxes are okay. Taxes are fine. We understand everybody needs to pay taxes. But if we have no say in the matter, then it's not fair. Give us representatives in Parliament in Great Britain and we will be fine with taxes. Taxes are okay. But we should have representatives in that Parliament to speak on our behalf. And if there's a vote and our representatives vote for the taxes, great. If there's a vote and our representatives vote against the taxes, but the majority of Parliament votes for the taxes, fine. we'll deal with that. But since we have no say in it, we have no representation in Parliament, it's unfair. Taxes are okay. But if we have no say in the matter, if we have no representation, then those taxes are not fair. Everybody understand that concept? Were they upset that there were taxes being raised? Were they upset at the taxes themselves? No. They were upset with the fact that they had no say in the matter. I'm going to give you an example here. How many of you have ever planned to do something? Please don't pack up yet. How many of you planned to do something? For example, you were going to clean your room, or you were going to take the garbage out, or whatever. You were going to do it. But then as soon as your parents told you to do it, you didn't want to do it anymore. How many people have had that happen? You were going to do it, but because you were told to do it, I'm not going to do that. I don't want to do that anymore. It's not my idea. That's what this is all about. You were willing to do it if it was your idea and you had a say in the matter. But because somebody was telling you you had to, you didn't like it anymore. That's the same thing with the colonists. No different than that scenario that I just gave you. Ladies and gentlemen, we will finish this up tomorrow.